Welcome to this Friday edition of Newsmax Now. I'm Miranda Kahn. We're glad you're here with us. The big story today, 2 Americans were killed in the Brussels suicide bombings earlier this week. Secretary of State John Kerry placed flowers outside the airport in Brussels for the victims of that attack. Secretary Kerry said the United States stands with Belgium and the nations of Europe.
We join you in thanking the very brave first responders who rushed to the scene on a moment's notice in order to care for the wounded and to save lives.
Secretary Kerry promised to continue to provide any assistance in investigating the attacks and bringing those responsible to justice. A Utah teenager who was injured in the Belgium airport attack is expected to make a full recovery.
I was sitting there on the sidewalk outside the airport, sitting in my own blood. And there was a feeling of calm and peace that I had, and it was beyond just the physical shock that I had. And I attribute that to the presence of God.
Mason Wells, a 19-year-old Mormon missionary, survived a similar situation 3 years ago at the bombing of the Boston Marathon. Wow. Belgian investigators are on the scene after a large police raid. A bomb disposal unit was deployed earlier. Belgian police wounded and captured a suspect said to be carrying a suitcase full of explosives. A major terrorist event foiled in Paris led to the raid in Belgium. Hundreds continue to gather outside a makeshift memorial in Brussels. The Brussels Philharmonic and the Flemish Radio Choir performed Beethoven's Ode to Joy in a tribute to the victims of this week's terror attacks. In the wake of these terror attacks, several Belgian Muslims fear backlash, and they're not the only ones. Many American Muslims fear retribution following the deadly attacks in San Bernardino and on 9/11. Likewise, many non-Muslim Americans feel not enough is being done by Muslims to weed out those extremists. And joining us now to discuss the very latest on the attacks in Brussels and what we can do to prevent future attacks here at home is Wilfredo Ruiz. He is the Communications Director at the Council on American Islamic Relations in Florida, and Tom Ruskin, who is a former NYPD detective investigator. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us here on Newsmax Now. Pleasure to have both of you.
It's a pleasure.
Tom, I want to start with you. We now know that the terrorists who struck Belgium originally planned to strike Easter weekend. Now, yesterday, Attorney General Loretta Lynch said that there are no credible threats to the United States. How confident are you that the U.S. is safe from a terrorist attack?
Well, I mean, at any point in time, some lone wolf can walk into a public station or an airport and detonate themselves. You can't protect every moment of every day relative to every single open target or easy target. But I am relatively sure that our intelligence is much better in the United States than it seems to be in Europe. And I think at this point in time, I think it's very important for the UAE as well as American authorities to sit down and start trading information to make sure that both sides have the same information and are acting on that information in real time.
Well, Wilfredo, there are a number of countries, organizations, as well as political candidates who are critical and, quite frankly, leery of CAIR. In fact, in the past few months, we have heard everything from having a temporary ban on Muslims to increasing surveillance on Muslim neighborhoods. And here's Republican candidates Ted Cruz and Donald Trump talking about those very things.
We need to work proactively with the Muslim community, cooperatively, just like when law enforcement is going after gang activity, you work with the community where gangs are located to prevent those acts of violence. In this case, we're not talking about criminal activity, we're talking about acts of war.
We have to be very vigilant, we have to be very careful, and we can't allow people coming into this country who have this hatred of the United States.
Tom, Bill Bratton, General Hayden, and Bernie Kerik all oppose what Ted Cruz has been suggesting. Do you agree with that? What is your reaction to what you just heard Ted Cruz and Donald Trump say?
I am against it as well. I think from a law enforcement standpoint, you take an investigation where it goes. So if you have information relative to a plot, then you follow that information. But you don't target a certain group or a certain nationality or a certain religion in this country to basically monitor those people. What Ray Kelly did years ago is he did work with Muslim leaders, and he did put undercovers into different Muslim churches as well as mosques to basically better monitor. But I think you work with community leaders to better get intelligence and real-time information to possibly thwart these attacks.
Wilfredo, what did you
And
think?
I congratulate Tom for saying that, because that's, the situation here in America is totally dissimilar to that one in Europe. Why is that? Because in Europe you have the phenomenon of very alienated communities not integrated with the rest of the state agencies, the law enforcement or the military, right? And that's not the case here. We have, in addition of thousands of Muslims serving in the military, other thousands serving in the law enforcement agencies, total integration of our community with the civic institutions, right? So those discourses like Trump's and Cruz discourses, what they might provoke is a situation similar to that in Europe, where the communities are polarized, alienated, and they don't feel they belong to the American fabric.
But let me ask you this. Do Muslim Americans and Muslims all around the world, do they need to do more to weed out these extremists?
All of us need to do more. Not necessarily Muslims themselves are the specific group that needs to do more. What is beyond any question is that the Muslim community is very necessary to fight terrorism. It is our community, in many occasions, the first one who detects an extremist or somebody with antisocial behavior, and we're the first one who reported to the FBI. The FBI wouldn't be doing the work they're doing today if it wasn't for the cooperation of the Muslim community here in America. And we wouldn't be in the situation we are in our armed forces with all the Muslims elements that are integrated, totally integrated in the armed forces as well.
Wilfredo Ruiz, thanks so much. Tom Ruskin, thank you both, gentlemen, for joining us here today. Pleasure to have you.